I stand before you tonight as Shadow Environment Minister, proud member for Vaucluse, a parent who wants to create a better world for her children and for their children, as someone concerned about protection of biodiversity, who cares about regional Australia, our economy, our resilience as a state and a nation, about energy security, and as someone who believes in the power of collective action. And Speaker, that's what we're seeing here tonight, collective action on one of the most pressing and challenging issues of our time, and that is climate change. I'm proud that New South Wales has bipartisan support to legislate for net zero emissions by 2050, and that Labor has agreed to support the Coalition's amendments to strengthen their bill by including a legislated interim target of a 70% reduction by 2035. This was the Liberal and Nationals' target in government, a target, by the way, that we are on track to deliver. So it's important that that target is maintained. It would have disappeared under the original drafting of this bill. In fact, Labor's election promise was a target of a 50% reduction by 2030. The former chief scientist, Professor Penny Sackett, said that it would be, quote, a large and inexplicable retrograde step to have that happen. And I note that many environmental stakeholders and experts who made submissions to the Parliamentary Committee on Planning and Environment into this bill had also called for that 70% target to be included in the legislation. Mr. Acting Speaker, in passing this new and improved bill, we are acting in the interests of our future generations. We are making a decision that won't only deliver economic dividends for our state, and that will happen, but also to protect our environment. Across this place, Speaker, there are many people of goodwill who have come together to support this bill. Many members who have worked together to ensure that New South Wales continues to be ambitious when it comes to reducing our ambitions, and we can all be so very proud of that. I pay credit to the member for Hornsby for his vision and ambition when he was in government to address this issue. I also pay credit to the member for Manly for his work in government and for continuing that advocacy in opposition. I also want to pay credit to the government and the Minister for Climate Change for their approach and for working constructively with the opposition and crossbench to accept our amendments to this bill. Speaker, it's only right that New South Wales, as the state with the largest economy and population in Australia, be highly ambitious when it comes to tackling climate change. And let's take a moment to revisit some of those ambitions to date. This started with the 2016 New South Wales Climate Change Policy Framework that set out the New South Wales Government's long-term goal to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and to make New South Wales more adaptable and resilient to climate change. When we left government, New South Wales was on track to double our economy and halve our emissions by 2030. The New South Wales Coalition delivered the Electricity Infrastructure Roadmap, a 20-year plan for New South Wales energy infrastructure that incentivised private investment in renewable energy while simultaneously reducing emissions and lowering electricity bills for the families and businesses right across New South Wales. Not only did the roadmap acknowledge an ambition by the previous government to seriously tackle climate change, but place great emphasis on the economic opportunity delivered by new energy technologies. And by delivering the plan, New South Wales is expected to attract billions of dollars in investment over the next decade. And it is important, Mr. Assistant Speaker, to recognise that almost 2/3 of this investment is expected to go into regional and rural New South Wales. And I mention that because in acting on climate change, we must clearly recognise that rural and regional communities are disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change. And it's important that we also ensure they are not disproportionately impacted by how we seek to respond to climate change. Action on climate is not an inner city issue, but too often we don't take the time to elevate the voices and clearly hear the concerns of our regional communities. The government also needs to listen to the significant concerns raised by communities affected by transmission lines. And I note that the proposed independent commission that will be in this bill has the opportunity to investigate and report on broad areas relating to this net zero transition. And it would be well advised to consider a review of how the government is responding to the concerns of regional communities and the infrastructure associated with the rollouts. The New South Wales Liberals and Nationals have successfully negotiated to have the voices of the bush included within these amendments. That was really important to us, important to regional communities, and I do sincerely thank the Minister for her openness and supporting those amendments. I would also urge this government to consider their further demonstrated support for rural communities by reconsidering their decision to delay the Coalition's $206.2 million Nature Positive Farming Program, a conservation program that incentivised farmers to invest in nature positive farming practices. We would love to see that back as soon as possible. Speaker, New South Wales also had a strong track record under the Coalition when it came to renewables. In December last year, the World Wildlife Fund gave New South Wales first place in its Renewable Superpower scorecard. The WWF said New South Wales secured top spot for the first time thanks to a range of new policy commitments, including expediting transmission and energy storage projects, and the release of First Nations guidelines for major energy projects, which aims to ensure the benefits of the transition are felt across First Nations communities. When the former Coalition government introduced the New South Wales Net Zero plan, the then Minister acknowledged that getting to net zero would not be easy, but our government was committed to delivering a plan that was grounded in science and economics. We understand this bill seeks to establish guiding principles to establish climate change. These principles are well established and have bipartisan support. And that first principle sets out that climate change is a serious threat to the social, economic and environmental well-being of New South Wales. And all of us in this place are deeply aware of that, because we are seeing time and time again communities across this state impacted by climate change. We've experienced the heat waves, the droughts, the devastating bushfires and the storms. As the 2021 New South Wales State of the Environment report set out, the changes to climate are expected to become more severe over time. I know my colleague, the member for Manly, also mentioned this, but I'll say it again because it's important. They include more extreme weather events, increasing coastal erosion and inundation, and greater impacts on infrastructure, human health and well-being. We also know that climate change will have a profound impact on biodiversity in New South Wales, with many endangered species at risk due to the threats posed by climate change. Failure to act on climate change will mean that the harmful impacts of these changes will not become more frequent, not just more frequent, but more severe, and failure to act would be an abrogation of our duties as elected representatives. But this Parliament is acting. I want to be clear, the Greens did say early on and made the comment that this bill is largely ornamental, and to some degree and to some extent, that's right, because the Coalition was on track for these targets, these ambitious targets, without legislation. However, if the government wants to legislate, we are supporting that, and we are very happy to support that, to provide even greater certainty, and in doing so also provide safeguards for our regional communities. The people of New South Wales rightly want a Parliament that is willing to tackle the big issues, to have representatives that are ambitious when it comes to having a vision for reducing our emissions. I commend this bill to the House.